Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're back once again with another amazing science tutorial video. But before we get started on this video, I want to give a shout out to some of my students. So shout out to Wendell Brewer, Carnisha Willis, Asia Parks, Drayvon Stevens, Laquan White, Cameron Hill, Takia Morgan, Shatina Clowers, Caleb Sermons, Tanisha Sullivan, and Xavier Three. Now, the students' names I just called were some of my students that said, Coach Spivey, the first time you taught cell structures and functions, we didn't quite get it. We didn't quite understand it. So that right there let me know as a teacher that I need to go further in detail with the content and further in detail with the materials to help my students get it. So I appreciate them for that. I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support. And most of all, I appreciate the feedback. So let's get started. We'll start off with cell organization. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. So the nucleus is located right here, and it calls the shots and gives the order. So it tells all the other organelles in the cell what to do. And then we have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is this jelly-like substance in which all the other organelles are located in. And our organelles, they're kind of like our cell factory workers. Each organelle has its own specific purpose and its own specific job or function to help the cell perform properly. If each organelle does not perform its job, then the cell won't function properly and it could possibly die. We're going to break cell organelle functions into a 3 or 4 part series. So we'll start off with part 1, and we're going to be looking at organelles that build proteins. So the nucleus is the control center. The nucleus actually gives the instructions for the types of proteins to make. And then we have the ribosomes. The ribosomes are like the protein making machines. Then we have the endoplasmic reticulum, which helps to finish the proteins. Then we have the Golgi apparatus, and the Golgi apparatus finishes, sorts, labels, and distributes the proteins. So it would kind of be like the main UPS office. And then the vesicles are the protein transport. So the vesicles would be like the UPS transport vehicles that transport those proteins around the cell. And then if we look at our protein assembly line, this is where the proteins get made and shipped off in order. So we first start off with the nucleus, then we move to the ribosome, then we move to the endoplasmic reticulum, then we move to the Golgi apparatus, and then we move to the vesicles that actually ship the proteins to the different locations in the cell. So why is making proteins so important? Because cells need workers, and those workers are proteins. So if we're making proteins, we need them to run our daily life and growth, and the cell must be able to read the genes. So the genes are that DNA, and the DNA tells what type of proteins to make. And then to build proteins, we have different types of proteins. We have structural proteins, which are like muscle fibers, hair, skin, and claws. Then we have enzymes, and enzymes help speed up chemical reactions. Without enzymes helping to speed up chemical reactions in our body, some of those reactions would never occur, and they would be very dangerous or harmful to us. And then we have some proteins that are signals or hormones that send certain messages throughout our bodies, and those receptors that receive those messages. So proteins do all the work. That's why we need to make proteins. And the organelles that help with protein synthesis, we'll go over those again. That's going to be the nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, and I left off the vesicles, but the vesicles are important for the transport of those proteins. So let's take a look at the nucleus. The function of the nucleus is to be the control center of the cell. So it's going to protect that DNA, and it's going to give instructions for building proteins. And then we look at the structure of the nucleus. It has a nuclear membrane, a nucleolus, and the nucleolus is the ribosome factory. So that's where ribosomes are made. And remember, ribosomes are the things or the organelles that make the proteins. And then we have chromosomes, which are important for DNA. So now let's talk about ribosomes. And ribosomes' functions are to make proteins. So they're the protein making factories. They read the instructions to build proteins from DNA. Remember, DNA gives the instructions for the type of proteins to build, and the ribosomes are where the proteins are actually made. And the structure, you have some that are free in the cytoplasm. So you'll see some of them floating freely around in that cytoplasm, and then some of them are attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So here's an example of the rough endoplasmic reticulum right here. If you notice, you see these little dots on here. All of these are ribosomes. And the reason why they call it the rough endoplasmic reticulum is because it looks bumpy or rough. So now let's take a look at the endoplasmic reticulum. And its function is to work on proteins, specifically the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which helps complete the proteins after the ribosome builds them. And it also makes membranes. So this would be the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So its structure, the rough endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes attached. So if you look at the picture over here, you notice little dots right here. These are those ribosomes that are attached. That's why they call it the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And it helps to work on proteins. And if you look, here's the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. If you notice in the picture right here, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum does not have ribosomes on it. That's why it's smooth. And the smooth endoplasmic reticulum helps to make membranes. And here we have the Golgi apparatus. And its function is to finish, sort, label, and ship proteins. It's like the UPS headquarters. It ships and receives proteins. And it ships those proteins in vesicles. And those vesicles are kind of like the UPS trucks that come out and deliver packages to someone's house. And these vesicles deliver proteins to all around the cell wherever the proteins are needed. And the structure are these membrane sacs. So if you notice, we see these membrane sacs. And we have these vesicles that come from that Golgi apparatus. And their job is to carry those proteins and transport those proteins to different parts of the cell. Now, we've discussed vesicles on the last slide, but let's discuss them in a little more detail. So their function is to move materials around the cell, and another function they have is to transport proteins. And we discussed earlier that they transport proteins to different parts of the cell where they're needed at. And their structure is a membrane sac. Remember, these vesicles come from that Golgi apparatus, and they ship those proteins to different parts of the cell. So now let's take a look at your first check for understanding. You're going to answer the following questions below. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer these questions, and I'll begin those 2 minutes starting now. Now let's see how you did on your first check for understanding. So number 1, what 5 organelles work together for protein synthesis? And you should have the nucleus, ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus, vesicles, and the endoplasmic reticulum. Number 2, put the order that these organelles work in to form proteins from start to finish. So first we start off with the nucleus. Remember, the DNA is in the nucleus, and the DNA gives that message to the ribosomes and tells them what type of protein to make. And then the ribosomes, they move on to the endoplasmic reticulum, and specifically the rough endoplasmic reticulum, to help finish those proteins. And then those proteins go from the endoplasmic reticulum to the Golgi apparatus, where it finishes, sorts, packages, and ships off those proteins in vesicles. Number 3, name 2 things proteins make up. Proteins make up our hair and our nails. Number 4, name 2 things proteins do. Proteins help speed up chemical reactions in the form of enzymes, and they also send chemical messages in the form of hormones. Now, so let's do an overall review of the organelles that build proteins. So we have the nucleus, and it gives instructions for protein synthesis, and it tells the ribosomes what type of proteins to build. And then the ribosomes are attached to the endoplasmic or that rough endoplasmic reticulum that helps finish those proteins. And then the smooth endoplasmic reticulum uses proteins to make membranes. And then we move on to our Golgi apparatus, and our Golgi apparatus actually, and let me put it in here, our Golgi apparatus actually finishes, packages, and ships those proteins. And then those proteins get shipped in vesicles, and they transport proteins to different parts of the cell. So now let's take a look at our second check for understanding. You have 1 minute to fill in the organelle with its functioning, and we'll begin that minute starting now. So now let's see how you did on your second check for understanding. So let's take a look at number 1. The blank gives the instructions for making proteins. So that would be the nucleus for this first one. Number 2, blank transport proteins to different parts of the cell. That's going to be those vesicles. Our vesicles transport proteins to different parts of the cell. Number 3, blank build proteins and are located on the rough endoplasmic reticulum. These would be our ribosomes. They build proteins, and they're located on the rough endoplasmic reticulum and also freely floating in the cytoplasm. Number 4, the blank is like a factory that helps finish building proteins. Well, this would be the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So I'm going to put rough ER up here. And then number 5, the blank is like a post office that finishes, packages, and ships proteins. This would be our Golgi Apparatus. Our Golgi Apparatus. And I'll put the Golgi app right here. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this science tutorial video was helpful, and to all my students that helped me put it together and gave me the ideas and the inspiration for it, I appreciate you and I love you and I love all the feedback. Once again, I'm Travis Spivey signing off with my son Jordan Spivey. Peace, and y'all have a great night.